Once upon a time, in a beautiful forest nestled between two tall mountains, there lived a young bluebird named Benny. Benny was not an ordinary bluebird, he was exceptionally brave and curious. He had a vibrant blue feather coat that shimmered like the sky on a sunny day, and his beak was the brightest shade of orange you could ever imagine. Benny lived in a cozy nest high up in a tall oak tree with his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bluebird, and his three siblings, Bella, Bobby, and Bonnie. The nest was made of twigs, leaves, and soft grass, and it was Benny's favorite place to be. He loved waking up early every morning, listening to the melodious chirping of the forest's creatures, and watching the sun rise over the mountains. One bright morning, as Benny was perched on a branch outside his nest, he heard a faint cry for help coming from the other side of the forest. Without hesitation, Benny's brave heart leaped with excitement. He knew he had to investigate and help whoever was in trouble. "Benny, where are you going?" asked Bella, his older sister, as she fluttered over. "I heard someone in trouble, Bella," Benny replied. "I need to find out what's happening and see if I can help." Bobby and Bonnie, who had just woken up, joined them. "We want to come too," they chirped. Benny nodded, and together they set off toward the distant cries for help. Along the way, they met their wise old friend, Mr. Owl. "Perched on a branch, hoot, hoot, young bluebirds," said Mr. Owl in his deep, wise voice. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" "We heard someone in trouble, Mr. Owl," Benny explained. "We need to find out who it is and help them." Mr. Owl blinked his large, round eyes thoughtfully. "Very well, young ones. But remember, on your journey, you may face challenges and dangers. Stay together, be brave, and most importantly, trust your hearts." With Mr. Owl's wisdom in their hearts, Benny and his siblings continued their journey through the forest, following the distant cries. They fluttered over babbling brooks, hopped from stone to stone across a gentle stream, and soared high above the swaying treetops. As they flew deeper into the forest, the cries for help grew louder. Finally, they reached a clearing and saw a sight that made their hearts sink. In the middle of the clearing was a small, furry creature trapped in a net, struggling to break free. It was a baby rabbit, his large, round eyes filled with fear. Without wasting a moment, Benny and his siblings swooped down and began to peck at the net, trying to free the rabbit. It was tough work, and they grew tired, but they didn't give up. They knew they couldn't leave the poor rabbit in distress. Just when they were about to lose hope, a friendly voice called out, "Need some help, young bluebirds?" They looked up to see a kind old tortoise named Tommy slowly making his way toward them. Benny nodded gratefully, and Tommy used his strong beak to help them peck at the net. Together, they managed to tear a hole big enough for the baby rabbit to escape. The baby rabbit hopped out, his tiny heart filled with gratitude. Thank you, he exclaimed. You saved me, Benny smiled warmly. You're welcome. What happened? How did you get caught in that net? The baby rabbit explained that he had been exploring the forest when he accidentally stumbled into a trap set by a human. He had been trapped there for hours, scared and helpless, until Benny and his siblings came to the rescue. As they listened to the rabbit's story, Benny couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. He realized that helping others was one of the most wonderful things in the world. The baby rabbit, whose name was Robbie, offered to show Benny and his siblings a shortcut back home. He led them through the forest, and along the way, they became fast friends. They played games, shared stories, and laughed together. When they finally reached the oak tree where Benny's nest was, Benny invited Robbie to stay with them for the night. Robbie gladly accepted, and they all settled down in the cozy nest, sharing stories of their adventures and dreams for the future. The next morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, Benny and his siblings said goodbye to their new friend Robbie, who promised to visit them again soon. They watched him hop away into the forest with a heart full of joy. From that day forward, Benny, Bella, Bobby, and Bonnie continued to explore the forest, always ready to help those in need. They learned that bravery, kindness, and friendship were some of the most precious treasures in the world, and their hearts were forever filled with the warmth of these experiences. And so, in the heart of the beautiful forest, the brave bluebird and his loving family continued to live their adventurous lives, making the world a better place one act of kindness at a time. And they all knew that no matter where their wings took them, their home in the tall oak tree would forever be a place of love, courage, and endless stories. The end. Once upon a time, in a peaceful meadow surrounded by wildflowers and tall grass, there lived a cute little rabbit named Rosie. Rosie had the softest, snow-white fur and the biggest, sparkliest brown eyes you could ever imagine. She lived in a cozy burrow beneath a mossy hill, where she was the youngest of 5 siblings, Rusty, Ruby, Ralph, and Remy. Rosie was unlike any other rabbit in the meadow. While her siblings spent their days nibbling on grass and playing simple games, Rosie had a curious spirit and a heart full of adventure. She yearned for excitement beyond the meadow's boundaries and dreamt of exploring the wide world that lay beyond. One bright and sunny morning, as Rosie sat outside her burrow, gazing at the distant mountains, a wise old turtle named Mr. Tully slowly made his way into the meadow. He had a shell covered in intricate patterns and carried an air of wisdom that the other animals respected. Rosie hopped over to him with excitement. "Mr. Tully, have you been beyond the mountains? What's it like on the other side?" Mr. Tully chuckled kindly. "Why, young Rosie, beyond the mountains lies a world full of wonders and adventures. But it's not without its challenges. You must be brave and cautious." The thought of adventure thrilled Rosie, and she decided right then and there that she would explore beyond the mountains one day. She thanked Mr. Tully for his advice and returned to her burrow with a heart full of determination. That night, Rosie couldn't sleep. She was filled with anticipation about her upcoming adventure. She imagined the distant lands, the towering trees, and the sparkling rivers she had heard about in stories. But most of all, she longed to meet creatures from beyond the meadow and make new friends. The next morning, Rosie gathered her siblings around her and shared her dream of exploring beyond the mountains. Rusty, Ruby, Ralph, and Remy exchanged worried glances. They loved Rosie dearly and were concerned about her safety. Rusty, the oldest of the siblings, spoke up. "Rosie, we're worried about you. The world beyond the mountains can be dangerous, and we don't want you to get hurt." Rosie understood her siblings' concerns, but she couldn't ignore the call of adventure in her heart. She replied with determination, "I promise to be careful, and I'll return home as soon as I can. I want to see the world, and I hope you can understand." Her siblings exchanged glances again, this time filled with a mix of worry and love. Finally, they nodded, knowing they couldn't stop their adventurous sister. "Okay, Rosie," Ruby said with a sigh, "but please promise to come back to us," with her siblings' reluctant blessing. Rosie set off on her grand adventure the next morning. She hopped past the meadow's edge and continued on, crossing babbling brooks and weaving through dense forests. Every step filled her with excitement and wonder. As she journeyed farther from home, Rosie encountered various animals she had never seen before. She met a wise old owl perched high in a tree, a playful squirrel who taught her how to leap from branch to branch, and a friendly deer who shared tales of far-off places. Rose's favorite encounter was with a family of colorful butterflies that fluttered around her, leaving a trail of vibrant colors in their wake. They told her stories of their travels, and Rosie couldn't help but feel a pang of homesickness. She missed her family but knew that her adventure was far from over. One day, Rosie reached the base of the towering mountains. She looked up at their snow-capped peaks and took a deep breath. She was determined to climb to the top and see what lay beyond. It was a challenging journey, and Rosie had to use all her strength and determination to make her way up the steep slopes. But when she finally reached the summit, her eyes widened with awe. Before her stretched a vast and breathtaking landscape she had never imagined. There were sparkling lakes nestled between emerald green valleys, lush forests with trees that reached the sky, and fields of wildflowers as far as the eye could see. Rosie felt as if she had entered a magical world. As she explored this new land, Rosie encountered more creatures, each with their own unique stories and lessons to share. She made friends with a wise old tortoise, a playful fox, and even a mischievous raccoon who taught her the art of finding hidden treasures. But as the days turned into weeks, Rosie began to miss her family more than ever. She realized that while adventures were exciting, the love and warmth of home were irreplaceable. She knew it was time to make the journey back to her meadow and her worried siblings. With a heavy heart, Rosie said her goodbyes to her newfound friends and started her journey back home. She retraced her steps, crossed babbling brooks, and climbed down the mountains. Along the way, she couldn't help but smile, knowing that she had grown wiser and stronger during her adventure. Finally, Rosie arrived back at her cozy burrow beneath the mossy hill. Her siblings rushed to greet her with tears of joy in their eyes. They hugged her tightly and realized how much they had missed her. Rosie looked around at her meadow, her family, and the familiar surroundings that she had once taken for granted. She realized that while the world beyond the mountains was filled with wonders, her true home was here with her loving family. From that day on, Rosie was content to stay in the meadow, sharing stories of her adventures with her siblings. She had learned that home was where the heart was, and her heart belonged right there in the meadow with the family who loved her. And so, Rosie the remarkable rabbit lived a life filled with love, adventure, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest treasures were the ones waiting for you right at home. The end.